INFJs often face a great deal of silent criticism because their very nature seems to stir complex reactions in people. They move through the world quietly, observing and understanding more than they reveal, and this air of subtle perception can make others uneasy. People sense that an INFJ sees beneath the surface, that they notice contradictions, hidden motives, or unspoken emotions, and this awareness can feel exposing. Even without intending to, INFJs carry an aura that triggers reflection in others. When people feel seen in ways they did not consent to or are not ready to confront, the reaction can be defensive, and it often manifests as silent disapproval rather than open confrontation. Their tendency to live by their values contributes to the silent criticism they receive. INFJs are usually guided by a deep moral compass that compels them to act with integrity and authenticity, even when it isolates them. This authenticity can highlight the inconsistencies or compromises in the lives of those around them. People who are not ready to face their own moral dissonance might respond with resentment, envy, or quiet skepticism. The INFJ may not even speak a word of criticism, yet their mere presence feels like a mirror to others' unacknowledged truths. This leads to a subtle undercurrent of criticism that follows them, often expressed through whispers, passive resistance, or exclusion. If you need clarity, alignment, and a deeper connection with your true self as an INFJ, ensure to check out the INFJ Playbook. The link is in the description of this video. Their social style, which oscillates between deep engagement and quiet withdrawal, can also invite silent criticism. INFJs are selective with their energy. They engage intensely when they feel genuine connection and retreat when they sense superficiality or conflict with their values. To those who do not understand this rhythm, the INFJ's sudden quietness or preference for solitude can appear as arrogance, aloofness, or judgment. People may assume that the INFJ believes they are above others, even when the withdrawal is purely a matter of self-preservation. These assumptions rarely get voiced directly, but instead turn to silent criticisms and subtle distancing. The paradox of the INFJ personality, being both warm and private, confuses many. They can be deeply compassionate, yet they guard their innermost thoughts closely. Others may feel a sense of connection, but also frustration at the invisible wall that remains. This inability to fully read or access the INFJ can breed suspicion. People sometimes criticize what they do not understand, and for an INFJ, whose mind and heart are layered with nuance, misunderstanding is almost inevitable. Rather than asking questions, many resort to quiet judgment or speculative narratives that the INFJ may never hear aloud, but can often sense intuitively. Their tendency to avoid conflict also contributes to the silent criticism they receive. INFJs rarely engage in open battles unless pushed to their limits. They prefer harmony and will often allow others to keep their misconceptions rather than confront them directly. While this preserves peace on the surface, it also leaves room for silent judgments to fester. Those who feel slighted, intimidated, or unsettled by the INFJ's behavior may never voice their feelings, but will form quiet opinions that ripple through social spaces unnoticed. The INFJ, with their acute sensitivity to emotional undercurrents, often feels the weight of this unspoken disapproval, even without verbal confirmation. Envy plays an unspoken role as well. INFJs have a way of inspiring others simply by existing authentically. Their insights, depth, and quiet competence can evoke admiration, but admiration often travels with its shadow, envy. People may silently critique them as a way to diminish the discomfort of feeling overshadowed or exposed. Because INFJs rarely engage in overt self-promotion, their strengths can appear effortless, which sometimes provokes the perception that they are trying to be perfect or acting superior, even when they are simply being themselves. Another subtle reason INFJs attract silent criticism is that they often disrupt unspoken social dynamics without intending to. Their intuition allows them to detect manipulation, dishonesty, or power plays in group settings, and their refusal to participate in these games can make them target. They might quietly challenge the status quo with a single well-placed observation, or they may simply disengage from unhealthy dynamics, but either action can provoke resentment. People who rely on social performance, control, or surface-level harmony may feel threatened by the INFJ's quiet refusal to conform, and instead of open confrontation, they choose silent censure. Their inner complexity also makes them easy to misinterpret. INFJs often carry an air of mystery because they process experiences deeply but reveal themselves selectively. Others may project their own insecurities, suspicions, or misunderstandings onto that mystery. A thoughtful pause can be misread as judgment. A need for solitude can be mistaken for disdain. A principled stance can be seen as moral superiority. Because the INFJ often moves quietly rather than defensively correcting every assumption, these misinterpretations solidify into unspoken criticism. The INFJ's heightened empathy ironically exposes them to the weight of this criticism more than most. Even when no words are spoken, they often feel the subtle energy of disapproval. Tones in a voice, shifts in body language, changes in group atmosphere. This sensitivity makes silent criticism feel heavier because they absorb not only the existence of the judgment, but also the emotions behind it. They live with the tension of being misunderstood without always having the opportunity or desire to correct the narrative, and the unspoken disapproval lingers in the background like static they cannot turn off. INFJs experience so much silent criticism because their existence in itself tends to disrupt the emotional equilibrium of the spaces they occupy. They carry an aura of depth and quiet intensity that others instinctively notice, even when they are not trying to be noticed. This presence, which comes from the combination of their intuition and emotional awareness, often makes people feel exposed without a single word being spoken. Someone might feel as though the INFJ can see past the surface they present to the world, and this unspoken recognition can be deeply uncomfortable. People are rarely prepared to confront their own hidden fears, contradictions, or insincerities, and when they sense that another person perceives these things effortlessly, the response is often unspoken criticism, a subtle defense mechanism to protect their own ego. Their quiet authenticity often invites the kind of judgment that no one dares to voice. INFJs do not thrive on performance or image maintenance, which can unintentionally challenge those who do. In a world where appearances and social roles are constantly on display, someone who moves differently, who seems to operate from a place of inner clarity and moral grounding, can feel like a rebuke, even if they never intend it that way. Silent criticism is often a reflection of this tension. People may admire the INFJ's integrity or self-possession, but that admiration is mixed with unease because it subtly reminds them of the compromises they have made with themselves. The INFJ's communication style also fuels this silent criticism from other people. They're selective with their words, often speaking only when they feel their contribution has depth or purpose. In group settings, this quietness can create a vacuum that others fill with assumptions. A thoughtful silence is mistaken for judgment. A moment of observation is interpreted as detachment. People who crave constant affirmation or overt participation may feel criticized simply because the INFJ does not engage in the same performative rhythm. These misunderstandings pile up into quiet resentment, and rather than confronting the INFJ openly, people retreat into their own unspoken narratives about who the INFJ really is. Their refusal to conform to superficial expectations is another reason for silent criticism. INFJs instinctively resist environments that demand inauthenticity, and they tend to step away from gossip, manipulation, or shallow social games. This quiet rejection of toxic patterns is rarely vocalized, but people notice, and noticing often translates to defensiveness. Those who thrive on such dynamics may perceive the INFJ's quiet boundary as a personal slight. Unable to accuse the INFJ of anything tangible, they turn to silent criticism, harboring thoughts of the INFJ as difficult, distant, or self-righteous, even when none of these labels are accurate. Their subtle influence in relationships and groups can also trigger envy, which often masquerades as silent disapproval. INFJs have an innate ability to form profound one-on-one connections and to read emotional currents in ways that others cannot. They may effortlessly gain trust, inspire confidence, or become the quiet emotional anchor for people around them. Those who struggle to create such bonds might see this and feel an unspoken jealousy. Rather than confront the envy or acknowledge their own insecurities, they project silent criticism toward the INFJ, convincing themselves that the INFJ must have ulterior motives or hidden flaws. What makes this criticism particularly heavy for INFJs is that they are wired to feel the things people do not say. A subtle shift in tone, a slight avoidance of eye contact, a change in energy within a room. These are signals that others might overlook, but an INFJ absorbs them almost involuntarily. Even when no words are exchanged, the emotional atmosphere carries the weight of judgment, and the INFJ senses it like background noise. The very sensitivity that makes them so empathetic to others also makes them acutely aware of when they're being silently criticized, which can lead to feelings of isolation and self-doubt. INFJs also face silent criticism because they disrupt comfort zones simply by living according to their internal compass. Most people navigate life through external validation, following collective norms and expectations to avoid standing out. INFJs, on the other hand, tend to pursue meaning, authenticity, and alignment with their deeper purpose, often rejecting the path of least resistance. This divergence can make others feel implicitly questioned. Even without saying a word, the INFJ's life choices can provoke others to wonder if they themselves are living authentically. Instead of facing this discomfort, some respond with quiet disapproval, forming judgments they may never articulate. Another reason they face silent criticism is because of their resistance to manipulation. Because they intuitively sense hidden motives, they're difficult to control or deceive for long. People who rely on subtle power plays or emotional leverage find this resistance frustrating. An INFJ who refuses to participate in these unspoken games can become the target of a silent campaign of criticism, where others share doubts or negative impressions behind closed doors rather than engage directly. This is especially common in professional or social environments where maintaining appearances is valued over honesty. One of the most profound reasons INFJs experience this silent judgment is their role as emotional mirrors. They do not simply interact with others on a surface level. They absorb, reflect, and sometimes even amplify the unspoken emotional realities of the people around them. When someone senses that the INFJ has noticed a pain, insecurity, or contradiction they are hiding, their instinct is often to turn that discomfort outward, even without words. They may frown subtly, grow cold, withdraw, or gossip quietly later. The INFJ rarely hears the words, but they feel the static of disapproval as clearly as if it were spoken. The duality of the INFJ personality also contributes to this phenomenon. They are warm and compassionate, capable of forging deep bonds, yet they maintain an air of private detachment. This paradox confuses people who prefer straightforward, easily defined relationships. Someone might feel close to an INFJ one moment and suddenly sense a wall the next, when the INFJ retreats to recharge or protect their inner world. These shifts often lead to silent narratives forming in others' minds. They're distant, they think they're better than us, or they're hard to understand. Instead of voicing these thoughts, people often let them ferment quietly as unspoken criticism. Another reason people critique unnecessarily is due to envy disguised as indifference or subtle dismissal. INFJs possess natural gifts, insight, creativity, emotional intelligence that can appear effortless. They might predict interpersonal outcomes, inspire trust in others, or navigate complex emotional waters without seeming to struggle. This quiet competence can stir a silent sense of comparison in those who must work harder to achieve the same effects. Few people are comfortable admitting envy outright. Instead, it transforms into private disapproval or minimization of the INFJ's character. They're too quiet. They're strange. They think too much. These judgments rarely make it to the INFJ's ears, but they linger in the spaces they inhabit. The subtlety of the INFJ's influence makes the silent criticism particularly enduring. Unlike overtly dominant personalities who might provoke open opposition, the INFJ shapes dynamics in invisible ways. They are often the ones offering quiet advice that shifts someone's perspective, modeling authenticity that inspires others to rethink their choices, or silently refusing to enable harmful patterns. These actions, though benevolent, can trigger resistance in people who feel the tremor of change but are not ready to embrace it. Because the INFJ's methods are indirect and understated, opposition emerges in equally quiet forms: looks, whispers, private judgments, rather than open confrontation. Silent criticism follows INFJs like a shadow because their presence is rarely neutral. They move through life carrying a natural gravity, a quiet depth that unsettles the surface-level flow of social interactions. People who prefer simplicity, predictability, or superficial ease often find themselves reacting to this depth without knowing why. The INFJ might enter a room and simply observe, yet others feel that unspoken observation like a mirror turned toward them. Humans instinctively sense when they are being truly seen, and this can trigger defensiveness in those who are unready to confront themselves. That defensiveness often manifests not as open conflict, but as silent disapproval, lingering looks, subtle coldness, and whispered assumptions. INFJs carry an invisible truth field around them. They rarely accept masks or facades at face value. Their intuition penetrates through social veneers and catches subtle incongruities. This does not mean they're judgmental. On the contrary, they are often deeply compassionate, but their mere awareness feels like exposure. When someone senses that an INFJ has perceived the things they try to hide from the world, it creates tension. Few people are comfortable admitting, even to themselves, that they feel seen in ways they did not consent to. Instead of confronting that feeling, they release it as silent criticism, often rationalizing it as dislike or suspicion of the INFJ. INFJs also trigger quiet scrutiny because they rarely explain themselves in conventional ways. They withdraw when they need to recharge, decline participation in activities that feel inauthentic, or make choices guided by their inner compass rather than by collective expectations. To the outside world, this behavior is hard to categorize. People who expect constant conformity or overt reasoning may interpret INFJ detachment as arrogance, rejection, or moral superiority. Yet the INFJ is rarely thinking about others in those moments. They are simply protecting their energy. The misunderstanding festers in silence, leaving the INFJ carrying the weight of unspoken criticism. INFJs often shape the atmosphere of a group without actively trying. They can bring calm, focus, or reflection, and this invisible power does not go unnoticed. In workplaces, social circles, or even families, someone who can shift energy simply by existing can feel threatening to those who depend on external control or loudness to maintain influence. Rather than address this sense of displacement openly, people react in quiet ways, minimizing the INFJ's contributions, doubting their intentions, or passing along whispers of disapproval. Silent criticism is the price of being both a mirror and a mystery. INFJs reflect unspoken truths to others without trying, and they are not easily understood in return. People fear what reflects their inner selves too clearly, and they mistrust what they cannot fully read. So the INFJ moves through life surrounded by quiet currents of judgment that they rarely provoke consciously, yet almost always sense. It is not a reflection of failure or fault, but a testament to the subtle power they wield by simply existing as themselves. INFJs move on a wavelength that many people cannot easily access or interpret. They are not loud about their presence, yet their energy is undeniable. This subtle intensity often evokes feelings in others that they cannot fully name. People may feel slightly unsettled without knowing why, and that unease transforms into quiet judgment. In social environments where people are more comfortable with predictability and surface-level engagement, an INFJ's depth and stillness feel like an unspoken challenge to the status quo. Their need for solitude and emotional boundaries also fuels misunderstanding that leads to silent judgment. INFJs do not thrive in constant social exposure, and when they withdraw to recharge, their absence can be misinterpreted as arrogance, indifference, or rejection. People who crave constant affirmation may silently resent this self-contained nature. They might begin to assume that the INFJ thinks they're better than everyone, even though the withdrawal is not about anyone else. Over time, these assumptions evolve into private criticism, expressed in tone shifts, unspoken narratives, or subtle exclusion, all of which the INFJ perceives through their heightened sensitivity. The way INFJs approach conflict also contributes to this silent criticism. They rarely engage in open confrontation unless absolutely necessary, preferring to address tension with quiet observation or indirect action. While this protects their energy, it also leaves room for others to project intentions onto them. People may interpret the INFJ's silence as passive judgment or moral superiority, even if the INFJ is simply processing the situation internally. This dynamic is particularly pronounced in environments where overt reactions are the norm and subtlety is easily misunderstood. Their insight into human behavior also contributes to the silent criticism they experience. INFJs often notice patterns and inconsistencies that others overlook or would rather keep hidden. Even when they do not voice their observations, their eyes and presence alone can communicate awareness. For someone who thrives on masks or manipulation, the sensation of being quietly read can feel threatening. Unable to openly confront someone who has said nothing, they resort to quiet resentment or private judgment. The INFJ leaves the interaction sensing the tension, but rarely receives any explicit feedback, deepening their awareness of being silently criticized. The silent criticism they face is often less about their flaws and more about the reflection they hold up to the world around them. It is a testament to their rare, quiet power that they provoke reactions without trying, that their mere presence calls people to confront truths they would rather leave unexamined. If you need clarity, alignment, and a deeper connection with your true self as an INFJ, ensure to check out the INFJ Playbook. The link is in the description of this video.